King Immortal chuckled and said, "Don't worry. So long as you help me kill King Gu Yuan, then I guarantee that I'll share the core of Origin World with you." The core of Origin World. King Jiuling's heart shook when he heard these words, and his gaze flickered. According to rumor, King Gu Yuan had obtained the energy within the core of Origin World, and it had allowed him to step foot into that unique peak realm of the Tao. King Jiuling was naturally very clearly aware of it, and he was even aware that the core of Origin World really did exist. After a long time of silence, King Jiuling said in a low voice, "I hope you don't disappoint me." An expanse of dazzling golden divine radiance surged out explosively from within him, and then rumbling resounded as his figure soared into the sky. He'd actually left as soon as he finished speaking those words. King Immortal watched him leave while a wisp of a secretive smile couldn't help but arise on the corners of his mouth. This world is finally about to change. Ancient Origin Region. There was a verdant and luxuriant valley there. It was suffused with an ancient and primitive aura, and it was covered in dark blue and hazy light that made it seem dreamlike, mysterious, and divine. Variables. Change. King Gu Yuan's towering and lofty figure was rooted in the depths of the valley, and his verdant branches and leaves that enveloped his surroundings had even blotted out the sky while revealing boundless divine might. He was pondering in silence. In the boundless years of the past, he'd been constantly worried that change would appear, but never had he imagined that this change was actually unavoidable. King Gu Yuan suddenly stretched out a verdant and glistening branch and waved it in the air, causing an extremely dazzling and resplendent dark blue circle of light to suddenly appear here. The dark blue circle of light was clear like a gem, clear blue like the sky, and suffused with a gentle, peaceful, and primitive aura. As soon as it appeared here, it caused the entire valley to be covered in an indescribably mysterious aura. When looked at from afar, it caused others to be unable to help but arouse heartfelt reverence and truly wish for nothing more than to lay prostrate on the ground and kowtow in worship. At this moment, even King Gu Yuan had become solemn, devoted, and even revealed a wisp of fervent reverence. He was like a devoted disciple that was paying respect in front of the altar. He stared fixedly at the circle of dark blue light, and then sorrow gradually surged throughout his body. "Master, the prophecy seems to be about to come true. When will you be able to wake up?" King Gu Yuan sighed with a wisp of sorrow. "Master, this old servant of yours has disappointed you. This old servant has tried his best throughout these years, yet I've actually been unable to comprehend your truly inheritances and completely control the Tao of the Origin World. I'm truly unable to rest easy. Never mind. If this change is impossible to turn around, then I swear to protect the Origin World to my death, even if I'm crushed to powder. Master, please, wake up soon." Huff. Late at night, Xianxia was hidden in the shadow of a deserted mountain ridge in Brink region, and he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief when he noticed that the danger they faced had vanished. "How close! I almost caused a monstrous calamity to befall us," Xianxia muttered while he still felt a lingering fear in his heart. While he was cultivating earlier within the underground cave, he'd become completely immersed in his cultivation and had become oblivious to everything. So he'd actually caused such a commotion and shocked the entire lost world, and it was even to the extent that King Immortal, King Jiuling, and King Gu Yuan had been alarmed. If Ming hadn't warned him in time, then the consequences would have been unimaginable. Fortunately, at that critical moment, Xianxia had actually been able to rely on his origin energy to activate the Tao Seal mark within his soul. Thus, he was able to conceal their tracks, soundlessly avoid the detection of those formidable consciousness, and resolve the calamity they faced. When he thought up to here, Xianxia said to Ming, "Thank you." At this moment, Ming felt a slight lingering fear as well, and she spoke unconsciously upon hearing this. "What exactly happened just now?" Xianxia was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed bitterly and shrugged. "Even I never imagined that merely the first level of the origin creation technique would actually cause such a huge commotion. It was truly unusual." Ming seemed to be lost in thought while she said, "Looks like all of this is really related to that cultivation technique that you've created. Perhaps it was exactly because that cultivation technique was too heaven-defying that it even shocked the heaven Tao of this world. Xianxia thought for a moment, and then he shook his head and said, "It probably isn't. I'm able to clearly sense that the energy of the heaven Tao in this lost world, the origin world, is very special. Its order and laws are in an absolute state of silence. It feels like they've lost all vitality, and it's indescribably deathly silent." Ming couldn't help but feel shocked. Really? The heaven Tao was indistinct, existed everywhere, and was impossible to judge. It was the first time that she'd heard the laws and order of the heaven Tao in a world was actually in a state of absolute silence. Xianxia nodded and said, "I fought the sovereign sect's eye of heavenly tribulation on more than one occasion in the outside world, and I've experienced numerous tribulations that were sent down by the heaven Tao as well. When compared to them, the energy of the heaven Tao in the origin world is simply at another extreme." Ming's eyes narrowed as she seemed to have thought of something, and she said, "I understand now. The heaven Tao of the origin world is either on the verge of destruction or it has been sealed." "Chun," she said with shock, "what's going on?" A wisp of recollection flashed within Ming's eyes, and she said after a long time passed, "When the shaman era was on the verge of obliteration, the energy of the heaven Tao at that time had fallen into such a state. I've experienced it in the past, and that's why I'm so sure." She paused for a moment before she continued. "However, the origin world is unlike the shaman era. It possesses a unique heaven Tao of its own, and it's completely isolated from the outside world yet is able to survive until now. According to my deduction, it might have been because its heaven Tao was sealed, and that was the only reason it survived until now." Even though he understood Ming, Xianxi's heart was still unable to calm down. The heaven Tao was sealed? Could anyone in the world accomplish such a feat? That's the heaven Tao. This is truly unimaginable. A short while later, Xianxia sighed with emotion. "So, in this way, perhaps we have to try to break through its seal in order to leave the origin world?" Ming thought for a moment before she said, "I can't say for sure, but it's clearly a bit too early to talk about all of this right now." Xianxia instantly came around, and he said with self-ridicule, "Right, our strengths can't even compete with those 3 supreme kings of the origin world, so it's truly unnecessary worry to consider all of that now." Ming suddenly changed the topic. "Since cultivating with your origin creation technique causes such a huge commotion, do you still intend to continue cultivating with it in the future?" Xianxia smiled and said, "It won't happen again. I wasn't aware that it would cause such a commotion, so I'll naturally pay attention to preventing that from happening when I cultivate in the future." He'd created the origin creation technique himself, so he was naturally clearly aware that it was entirely possible to avoid that problem if he were to pay attention to it. As he spoke, he directly passed the first level of the origin creation technique to Ming via voice transmission. "Try to cultivate it for now. Feel free to ask me if you don't understand anything." It was still late in the night right now, and the 9 moons were still illuminating the sky and emanated boundless origin energy essence. Ming didn't hesitate, and she silently comprehended and pondered on it after she obtained the cultivation technique. Once she was sure that she'd fully comprehended it, she sat down cross-legged and started to cultivate. Xianxia flicked his sleeve, and then a rain of light descended and transformed into a formation that fully concealed this area. After he cultivated with the origin creation technique, Xianxia clearly sensed that he was entirely capable of utilizing the laws and order of the origin world. Even though this world didn't possess the talisman Tao, it didn't represent that the talisman Tao didn't exist. It was like how he'd refined and absorbed the era brands of the last 8 eras. He'd utilized the energy of the talisman Tao to accomplish that. Now, he'd grasped the laws and order of the heaven Tao in the origin world, and it was equivalent to grasping the core of origin energy. So, he was fully capable of controlling it at will. Any cultivation technique of the outside world and even forces or techniques like the sword Tao, talisman Tao, the 5 elements, yin, yang, lightning, wind, light, darkness could be used as reference and utilized via origin energy. This would allow them to reveal all sorts of terrifying and unique might while being utilized through origin energy. This was the benefit of comprehending the method to cultivate origin energy. Taking control of strength was only secondary, and it was taking control of the laws and order of the Heaven Tao that was the key. Moreover, comprehending the laws and order of the origin world had allowed Xianxia to obtain a huge amount of information related to the origin world. For example, the origin world had actually existed for exactly the same amount of time since the chaos of the three dimensions had been split open. Both of them had experienced 8 eras. This even made Xianxia suspect that more than one Heaven Tao had been born when the chaos of the three dimensions was split apart. So, where did this unique Heaven Tao that filled the origin world come from? A further example was that while the origin world had existed for countless years, its Heaven Tao had been in a constant state of absolute silence. This caused the cultivation system related to it to become extremely crude and simple. It was even to the extent that a civilization of cultivation and cultivation system hadn't even been formed. This meant that it was utterly impossible for sex to exist within the origin world. Without sex, it was naturally impossible for it to possess all sorts of cultivation techniques, combat techniques, paths of cultivation, and so on and so forth. In other words, the entire origin world was in a state of early beginning when techniques hadn't even been born. Everything related to cultivating had been formed naturally, and it seemed to be extremely disorderly. For example, the living beings within Origin World were only able to cultivate because they were cultivating naturally as an effect of the bloodline and natural talent they possessed, and they'd never considered that there was a system to cultivate or that they could learn and create. Of course, Xianxia had seized a cultivation technique from the golden armored ant king. But in Xianxia's opinion, that cultivation technique was simply crude to the extreme. Most importantly, it was made specially for the golden armored ant king, and it was utterly unsuitable for any other living beings. This meant that a small portion of the living beings in the origin world were consciously trying to create cultivation techniques, but it was far from sufficient to form a true cultivation system. It was a very strange feeling. It was like laying eyes on an ancient place that could clearly give birth to all sorts of prosperous civilizations of cultivation. However, the Heaven Tao was in a state of absolute deathly silence. So this ancient place hadn't been able to form a true cultivation system of its own until now. Xianxia couldn't help but be slightly surprised when he found out about all of this. Exactly what force was capable of putting the origin world's Heaven Tao into such a state and caused the origin world to fall into such a state? Ming finally awoke from her cultivation when a wisp of light arose in the horizon. The first glimmer of dawn descended onto her gorgeous face, and it caused her already aloof and divine bearing to seem even more extraordinary. How is it? Xianxia had been constantly observing Ming, and he couldn't help but ask this question when he saw her wake up. He was very curious about whether the origin creation technique he created would be suitable for Ming. It's fine. A wisp of a beautiful arc had appeared on her angular and glistening lips. Xianxia immediately heaved a sigh of relief. However, suddenly, Ming's ink-black and beautiful brows had knit together slightly as if she'd encountered some sort of problem. Xianxia couldn't help but become slightly anxious because of this, and he said, "What's wrong?" Ming thought for a moment before he said, "I'm probably the cause of it. In the past, I've been constantly focused on cultivating in the shaman Tao, and I only tempered the might of my physical body and blood. Now, I'm suddenly cultivating a completely new path towards the Tao, so I'm finding it difficult to adapt." Xianxia smiled and said, "Don't be impatient. Just take it slow." Ming nodded and asked, "What about you? Where is your cultivation roughly at right now?" Xianxia said casually, "The 9th level of the chrysalis realm, which is equivalent to the immortal king realm in strength. Unfortunately, this is only the first level of the origin creation technique, and I haven't completed the specifics of the 2nd level." Ming was stunned. "You've already attained the highest level of the chrysalis realm?" Xianxia replied with a question. "Could it be that you haven't?" Ming shook her head. "I've only been able to attain the 8th level of chrysalis." Xianxia was speechless. "It's already really good that you were able to attain such a level overnight." Ming understood this reasoning as well. The key reason that made them able to attain such a level of cultivation in an extremely short period of time was that they'd attained a strength comparable to a Saint Immortal before they'd even cultivated the origin creation technique. So, to both Xianxia and Ming, The cultivation of the origin creation technique was merely a method to utilize origin energy and completely refine and absorb the origin energy that had been accumulated within their bodies. Coupled with the fact that they were experts comparable to the Region Lord realm in the outside world, it meant that they wouldn't encounter any barriers while they cultivated, and they just had to accumulate sufficient origin energy before their strengths would rise incessantly. Right, how many levels will the origin creation technique possess? Asked Ming. 3. Xianxia spoke swiftly. The first level is the chrysalis realm, and it's divided into 9 levels. Cultivating it to perfection would be equivalent to possessing strength comparable to an immortal king. The second level is the apotheosis realm, and it's called the 5 levels of apotheosis, and its name was derived from the transformation into a god. Cultivating it to perfection would be equivalent to being at the Tao Lord realm. When he spoke up to hear, she couldn't help but shrug and say, the third level is called the fate realm, and it's derived from the grasp of one's own fate. However, this is merely a thought of mine, and I'm unable to realize it now. Unless I'm able to step foot into the Tao Lord realm one day, then perhaps I'll be able to complete the cultivation technique for the third level. Ming raised her clear eyes and stared at Xianxia as she spoke seriously. I believe you'll be able to accomplish it. Xianxia smiled. I hope so. After that, they didn't converse anymore because they had to make the best use of their time to continue on their journey. Because if they didn't seize the moment when it was daytime to travel, then they would have no choice but to hide themselves once night arrived to avoid being noticed by those 3 supreme kings of the origin world. It was even to the extent that she still felt slightly worried even while they traveled during the day. Because he kept having the feeling that this escape of theirs seemed to be watched by an invisible eye. Swoosh! Swoosh! Ripples arose in space as Xianxia and Ming brought Meng along as they flashed towards ancient origin region. Presently, they were merely aware that King Mo Luo had seen through their identities as outsiders, so they were fleeing desperately out of Brink region. Have you noticed? It seems like every single action of ours has been noticed. Ming spoke abruptly as they traveled. It was like this question had been hidden in her heart for a long time, and she couldn't help but ask about it at this moment. You felt it as well? She was stunned, and then his expression turned solemn. Then have you felt that our change of direction towards the ancient origin region had been intentionally encouraged by someone from the shadows? Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. You're saying that someone has intentionally stopped us from heading to Nine Soul region? She nodded and said, yes. I've been constantly observing throughout our journey but have been unable to notice any traces. However, I'm sure that if all of this is a scheme, then it's definitely King Mo Luo. King Mo Luo, Ming muttered while a wisp of coldness filled her clear eyes. So, based on this, that fellow hasn't just seen throughout identity. He is even aware of everything we've done all along the way? After that, she couldn't help but frown. But why hasn't he acted immediately against us and intends to draw us to the ancient origin region? She pondered deeply before he said, perhaps he's trying to make us go against King Guyuan? Or perhaps he'll benefit from our arrival at ancient origin region. Ming was unable to figure it out as well, and she fell silent. She suddenly seemed to have thought of something, and he spoke with a burning gaze. Ming, do you think that it's the beings we encountered all along the way who have exposed our whereabouts and actions? After all, if those beings act as King Mo Luo's spies, then King Mo Luo would be immediately aware no matter where we go. Ming suddenly raised her head and said, perhaps we can capture some of them and ask about it. 10 minutes later. Swoosh! Swoosh! Not long after Xianxia and Ming's figures flashed past a mountain stream. A living being shaped like a turtle which had a white shell that was over 10 m wide and possessed a 7-colored tail of a fish had stuck out its head from the mountain stream. It was a being called a 7-light turtlefish. It opened its lively eyes and stared for a short moment at the direction Xianxia and Ming had gone towards, and then it crawled up onto the banks of the stream and howled in a low voice. After that, an emerald green bird that was only as large as a butterfly had appeared out of thin air. The emerald green bird was completely covered in light blue arcs of lightning which were fine like hairs. Even though it was small in size, its imposing aura was extraordinary. It muttered for a while with the turtle before it flapped its wings and swiftly transformed into a strand of light blue lightning which tore through the air and vanished into the distance. The turtle seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief upon witnessing this, and then it moved its limbs slowly and walked towards the stream again. But right after that, its figure stiffened, and it stood motionlessly on the spot, because a man and a woman had suddenly appeared at the side of the stream. Surprisingly, it was Xianxia and Ming who'd just left. Roar! The turtle roared furiously, and then it suddenly opened its mouth and actually attacked Xianxia and Ming. Swoosh! However, it hadn't even been able to complete this attack when a sharp dark violet sword had appeared at its neck, and the sword was filled with killing intent. Tell me what you did just now, otherwise, I'll kill you and eat you right now. Xianxia spoke indifferently. Ming couldn't help but chuckle. Kill it and eat it? This fellow still has the mood to joke even at a time like this. The 7 light turtlefish's enormous eyes constricted, and then it revealed a terrified and bewildered expression. It was like it didn't understand Xianxia. Xianxia laughed coldly. After he cultivated the origin creation technique and comprehended the laws and order of this world, he'd grasped the language utilized by the living beings here. So, how could he be unable to discern that this bastard was feigning ignorance? Pooh! Xianxia didn't hesitate at all. He stabbed with his sword and chopped its neck off, causing blood to spray like a fountain. After that, the turtle crashed to the ground. You kill it just like that? Ming was stunned. I'd given it a chance. Xianxia spoke casually. Of course, that's of no importance. I observed its shell earlier, and it's completely sufficient to be utilized as a precious material for equipment refinement. Didn't you need a suitable pike? If this shell is refined along with the front limbs of the golden armored ant king, then it would be entirely possible to create an extremely formidable treasure. Only now did Ming understand Xianxia's intentions, and she couldn't help but feel warmth in her heart while she said to herself, so, everything he did was actually for the sake of crafting a weapon for me. Swish! Xianxia didn't start removing the turtle's shell right away, and he flipped his palm instead before a ball of light blue lightning actually appeared there. Crackle! The ball of light blue lightning transformed into an emerald green bird, and it struggled incessantly in Xianxia's palm, yet its struggling was in vain. Surprisingly, it was the emerald green bird that had just left. Now that you've seen what happened to it, I'll only ask. Xianxia spoke indifferently while killing intent flowed within his eyes. However, he hadn't finished speaking when the bird's entire body trembled before it shrieked. My lord! Spare my life! My lord! Spare my life! This lowly one will definitely tell you everything. This stunned Xianxia instead. Never had he imagined that this bird would actually be so cowardly, and he couldn't help but be seized with an impulse. He said, Tell me truthfully about everything you've done. Then not only would I let you live, I'll even give you a cultivation technique. It was unknown whether the bird had actually understood Xianxia, and it hurriedly nodded before Xianxia's voice had even finished resounding through the air. Said swiftly, It was King Luo. He instructed this lowly one to report all your movements to him. Xianxia and Ming exchanged glances while they seemed to be telling each other that it was really as they'd expected. Xianxia asked another question. How did you confirm our whereabouts? The bird didn't hesitate to give King Luo away. My lord, there's something you're not aware of. All the living beings within Brink region have received King Luo's orders, and they have to report your whereabouts so long as you make an appearance. Xianxia's eyes narrowed. Even though he'd guessed that it was the case, he still couldn't avoid feeling shocked when he confirmed all of this. Why exactly did this fellow, King Luo, mobilize such huge forces to track us? When Xianxia asked the bird that very same question, the bird shook its head to indicate it didn't know, and Xianxia was naturally able to determine that it wasn't lying. Xianxia fell silent for a long time before he said, So, unless I leave Brink region, otherwise, King Luo will be aware of my whereabouts at the first possible moment no matter where I go? The emerald green bird nodded forcefully. My lord, you are wise. It's exactly like that. Xianxia suddenly smiled, and his smile was very thought-provoking. He said, Then, Do you want to obtain a technique that'll be able to double the results of your cultivation? The emerald green bird was a living being from the origin world called a thunderbird. It was swift like a bolt of lightning, and it was adept at being a messenger yet didn't possess a great combat strength. The emerald green bird couldn't help but be stunned when it heard Xianxia's suggestion. A cultivation technique that can double my speed of cultivation? What does that mean? Because it had never heard of anything like that since it was born. A cultivation technique can even be passed down? Air. The bird hesitated for a moment and said, "My lord, I'm slow-witted. Can you please explain a little?" She spoke casually. "Don't think too much about it. All I ask is if you agree or not. This is an opportunity that can change your fate." The bird clearly felt that she was threatening it, and it gritted its teeth and seemed to be shouldering a heavy burden as it said in a low voice, "How could I dare to refuse your good intentions, my lord?" As soon as it finished speaking these words, it couldn't help but become overcome with sorrow and feel an indescribably sense of loss. It was like it had seen a cage trapping it completely, and it had lost its freedom. She hadn't imagined that this suggestion of his would actually cause the emerald green bird to so many strange thoughts. When he heard it agree, he immediately transformed the cultivation technique for the first level of the chrysalis realm into a thought and passed it to the bird. In an instant, the bird seemed as if it had been struck by lightning, and it shrieked after a long time passed. "This is really a cultivation technique? It's too miraculous." It impatiently started to look through the cultivation technique, and it wasn't long before its attention was completely drawn by the cultivation technique to the point of being utterly immersed. "Aren't you curious about why I've done this?" She couldn't help but ask Ming, who'd been constantly standing silently at the side. "You definitely have an objective behind it, right?" Ming replied with a question instead. She smiled while he praised in his heart. "She really is wise. He was trying out a method, and if he succeeded, then it would be sufficient to change the situation that they were in right now." Shriek! Shriek! How miraculous! It's truly indescribably miraculous. After a long time passed, the emerald green bird shrieked as if it was laughing and crying at the same time, and it seemed as if it had gone mad. Obviously, it was truly too shocked by the cultivation technique she had passed to it. She knew that the time was right upon witnessing this scene, and he said frankly, "Listen, the only request I have is that you spread this cultivation technique throughout the world and allow even more living beings to be able to cultivate." The bird was stunned again. After quite some time passed, it actually gazed at Xianxia with respect and said, "My lord, you really intend to spread such a technique?" Xianxia nodded. The bird suddenly cried out once more, "Amazing! Truly too Amazon. My lord, such an action is simply like an eternal merit that brings blessings to the entire world and its future generations. All the living beings of Origin World will forever remember your greatness." Even she was slightly unable to endure it when a bird praised him like that, and he coughed dryly and said, "I'm just doing what I can to help my fellow Taoists in the Origin World." The bird was moved to the point it started crying, and it wailed, "My lord, you're too humble." She really couldn't endure this any longer, and he interrupted it. "Enough! Your current mission is to spread this technique, right? I'll pass the second level of the cultivation technique to you once you've accomplished this task." The emerald green bird's eyes suddenly lit up, and it spoke with excitement. "There's an even higher level of this cultivation technique? Don't worry, my lord. I'll gather all my friends to help you spread this cultivation technique, and will definitely spread your reputation throughout the Origin World." As it spoke, it impatiently transformed into a wisp of light blue lightning and intended to act. "Wait!" She stopped it and said, "What's your name?" "Oh, my lord. Just call this lowly one Emerald." The emerald green bird answered without turning back, and then it tore through the air and vanished. Emerald? She was stunned. This name really does suit it. Now, can you tell me the reason? Ming couldn't help but ask this question once Emerald had left. "Be patient. It won't be long before you'll understand. Of course, it would be pointless to speak about it if it fails." She smiled mysteriously. Ming couldn't help but glare at him when she heard this. Then I'll have to wait and see. She couldn't help but chuckle, and then he started to deal with the 7 light turtlefish's corpse because he intended to seize this opportunity to craft a suitable pike for Ming. At an ancient forest within Brink region. This was where the Thunderbird clan resided, and over 10,000 Thunderbirds resided here. This place was also called the Scout Camp of Brink region. The reason for that was very simple. The Thunderbirds' natural talent had determined that they were most suited to play the role of scouts, because they were invaluable when it came to conveying information or spying on the enemy. Patriarch ABA, Emerald has given you the chance, and it all depends on your own choice. This is an opportunity that can change the fate of our entire clan. They were in an extremely strong and ancient tree that was over 300 m thick, and the insides of the tree had been emptied and transformed into an enormous bird nest hall. It was the ancestral grounds of the Thunderbird clan, and it had an ancient history. At this moment, Emerald was standing at the center of the hall and seemed to have an impatient expression on its face. After it obtained that cultivation technique from Xianxia, Emerald had directly returned to its clan and told its patriarch ABA about it. After all, it naturally intended to share such a good thing with the members of its clan first. Emerald was very selfless in this aspect, and it hadn't hidden anything. However, Emerald was infuriated because its clan's patriarch ABA was suspicious and doubtful, and this caused Emerald's fervor to transform into irritation. Emerald, you said that person was the enemy who King Emoluo is looking for? Supposedly, his origins are mysterious, and he doesn't belong to our origin world. Perhaps these actions of his carry ill intent behind them. ABA spoke slowly. ABA was an extremely divine thunderbird that was completely emerald green like jade, and its eyes were suffused with a hue of experience. In my opinion, you should report this matter to King Emoluo as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's very likely that it'll arouse displeasure in King Emoluo and bring death to you. At that time, it wouldn't just be you who suffers. Our entire Thunderbird clan will suffer along with you. These words caused extreme feelings of grievance and anger to surge in Emerald's heart, and it suddenly shrieked. Forget it. Forget it. Since all of you aren't willing to change, then I'll give this opportunity to other beings. As it spoke, it transformed into a wisp of lightning and left in anger. What a hot-blooded and simple little fellow. ABA sighed. He'd lived for a long time and had witnessed many storms. So, how could he not understand that there was no free lunch in this world? Looks like I have no choice but to pay a visit to King Emoluo myself and make amends. ABA stood up and was about to stride out of the hall. However, he inadvertently recalled what Emerald said just now. An opportunity to change the fate of the clan? No matter if it's true or not, perhaps I can take a look at that cultivation technique first? ABA was hesitant. After a long period of silence, he wasn't able to restrain the curiosity he felt, and he started to look through the mysterious cultivation technique that Emerald had left behind. My God! After a short moment, his entire body trembled as he exclaimed with surprise. My God! A long time later, this patriarch of the Thunderbird clan who'd lived for a very long time had actually been unable to restrain his shock and cried out involuntarily. My God! In the end, an exclaim of would resound intermittently from Patriarch ABA, and it seemed extremely amusing and laughable. The 2 Thunderbird retainers standing on guard outside the hall were dazed. What's wrong with the Patriarch? He's actually shouting like a stupid kid that hasn't experienced the world. How inconceivable! While the 2 of them were surprised and bewildered, they suddenly heard Patriarch ABA's impatient howl. Quickly gather all the warriors of the entire clan. I'm holding a meeting. I'm going to announce an important matter that can change the fate of our entire clan. Oh, my God! Hurry up! Hurry up! In an instant, both of them almost thought their patriarch had gone mad. However, they'd still acted unconsciously out of respect to their patriarch. On this day, all the members of the Thunderbird clan obtained a unique and mysterious cultivation technique. The entire clan was excited, and it was like they'd laid eyes upon hope to change their fate. It was also on this day that Patriarch ABA, had ordered the entire clan to dispatch numerous secret agents of the clan to spread this cultivation technique throughout the world. As for whether his actions would offend King Luo, Patriarch Aba didn't care anymore because it was an opportunity to change the fate of his clan after all. How could he possibly allow it to slip by? A few days later, the origin creation technique? Have all of you cultivated it as well? Yes, this cultivation technique is truly miraculous. I've clearly sensed a change in my strength upon cultivating it. It's simply miraculous. Exactly. I heard that this cultivation technique was bestowed upon us by a great figure from the outside world, and he's extremely formidable. How could any clan within the entire Brink region be unaware of that lord right now? I heard that there are even higher levels of this cultivation technique. That's why we can't offend him in the future, and we even have to repay him properly if we have the chance. We can't allow that lord to think that we're ungrateful. Oh, I had such intentions. But we absolutely can't allow King Luo to find out about it. After Emerald and its fellow Thunderbirds had set out, the first level of the Chrysalis realm in the origin creation technique had spread continuously at an extremely shocking speed throughout Brink region, and it was obtained by countless living beings who resided in Brink region. It was like sparks of a flame that appeared on a grassland. It was impossible to stop, and it was probably impossible to turn this situation around even if King Luo himself took action. My king! My king! The pitch-black flying snake charged impatiently into the pitch-black hall that King Luo resided in, and it cried out, "It's bad! It's bad!" Presently, it was interrupted by an indifferent and dignified voice before it could even finish speaking. "There's no need to speak further. I understand everything." King Luo had transformed into a handsome man in a black cloak, and he had an emotionless expression on his face. "My king, since you know about everything, then do you have any instructions?" The flying snake spoke in an anxious tone. "You can leave." King Luo waved his hand. "My king!" The flying snake was stunned. "Leave!" King Luo spoke in a stern voice. The flying snake's figure shook, and then it hurriedly withdrew from the hall while carrying a bellyful of surprise and bewilderment. Right when it was about to leave completely from within the hall, a wave of roaring laughter suddenly resounded from the hall behind it. "A change! Ha ha ha! This is a change! You've really given this king an enormous pleasant surprise." The veil of night was like ink in the air, yet the 9 mysterious and divine dark blue moons illuminated the sky. Xianxia sat casually by the side of a secluded stream, and he chewed an emerald green blade of grass while he stared into the sky. Ming sat cross-legged at the side in meditation while a dark golden pike that was around for long laid on her legs. Meng Meng had squatted at the side instead. It had a rare serious expression on its face as it utilized the mental cultivation technique recorded within the first level of the Chrysalis realm, and it absorbed the essence of origin energy that drifted down from the sky. "Interesting. They still haven't made an appearance tonight." She spoke abruptly. It was already the 7th day since he'd spread the first level of the Chrysalis realm within the origin creation technique into the world, and King Luo, King Jiling, and King Gu Yuan hadn't shown themselves throughout these 7 nights. So it seemed extremely unusual. Perhaps they are discussing a strategy in secret with the intention of stopping all of this? Ming opened her clear eyes and spoke indifferently. They hadn't stopped moving throughout these 7 days of time, and they'd clearly sensed the change in atmosphere within the origin world as they traveled. All of this came from the dissemination of the origin creation technique. It was really too quick. Even Xianxia and Ming had never imagined that Emerald would actually act so quickly, and it allowed the origin creation technique to rage through the origin world like a storm and bloom throughout the world. It was even to the extent that all the living beings Xianxia's group passed all along the way already possessed knowledge of the first level of the Chrysalis realm. Such a speed of dissemination was simply astounded, and this clearly showed how welcomed the origin creation technique was within the origin world. At the same time, Xianxia's reputation had spread as well. Presently, practically every single living being in the origin world was clearly aware that this portion of the origin creation technique they obtained was from Xianxia, and they admired and respected him to the extreme. After all, There had never been any cultivation technique in the past which could be cultivated by all living beings like the origin creation technique could. Moreover, the results from cultivating it were extremely shocking as well. It was simply an unprecedented feat. It was a grand event that had never occurred since time immemorial. Such change was exactly what Xianxia looked forward to. In other words, since the moment he'd taught the cultivation technique to Emerald, Xianxia had expected that it was bound to change the situation within the origin world once it was spread. Because it wasn't just a simple cultivation technique. It was an unprecedented cultivation system that was starting to sprout up throughout the origin world. This was absolutely an unprecedented change in the origin world. After all, according to Xianxia's deduction, there was utterly no cultivation system, sex, or a huge variety of cultivation techniques and combat techniques here when he arrived at the origin world. Xianxia's actions was like planting a seed in a patch of soil that had never been used, so its influence to the entire origin world was immeasurable. The only thing Xianxia hadn't expected was that Emerald would actually disseminate it so quickly, and the reaction it got was too shocking. Just like this very moment, Xianxia was able to sense at least 30+ living beings utilizing the origin creation technique at the side of the stream right now, and they were ceaselessly swallowing the origin energy essence that was descending from the sky. However, unlike when Xianxia utilized it to cultivate that day, their cultivation hadn't caused world-shocking phenomena to appear. This was very understandable. After all, Xianxia had merely spread the first level of the chrysalis realm within the origin creation technique. I believe that it won't be long before all these living beings won't be satisfied with just cultivating the first level of the chrysalis realm. At that time, Emerald will definitely come looking for me again. Xianxia smiled as he spoke these words. That's your objective? Asked Ming. Yes, Xianxia said frankly. We're all alone in the origin world right now, and we're like outsiders that are rejected by all the myriad of living beings here. So, if we want to change the situation that we're in, then we can only change their attitude towards us. If they accept us, thank us, and even respect us, then we'll definitely be able to avoid a huge amount of unnecessary trouble while we move about the origin world in the future. It's even to the extent that even if we go against King Mo Luo, King Jiling, and King Gu Yuan, a portion of them would come forward and support us. That would be more than enough. The general situation moved along with the heart. Once we win the trust of the living beings here and make a good impression to them, then would anyone besides King Mo Luo, King Jiling, and King Gu Yuan go against us? Besides that, if we want to leave Origin World, then we absolutely can't do without the assistance of the living beings here. For example, they can help us gather leads, investigate, obtain information, and so on and so forth. As Ming gazed at Xianxia, who was speaking confidently, a wisp of heartfelt admiration couldn't help but suffuse her pure and pitch-black eyes, because she'd never imagined that this fellow before her would have actually given its effect and influence so much thought. When he spoke up to this point, Xianxia suddenly frowned and said, "Of course, our actions will definitely arouse vigilance in King Mo Luo, King Jiling, and King Gu Yuan, and it's even to the extent that they might become hostile towards us. So, we still have to rely on ourselves in order to survive in the origin world." Ming deeply agreed, because the help of another was just help, and they still had to rely on their own strength when facing the absolute strength of another. Xianxia raised his head to gaze at the 9 dark blue moons in the sky, and he seemed to be lost in thought as he said, "Just like this very moment, those 3 supreme kings haven't shown themselves for an entire 7 days of time. I presume our actions took them by surprise, and perhaps our journey won't be disturbed by them for the next few days. But once danger does arrive, it will definitely be extremely dangerous." Ming's expression had become solemn and serious as well. "So, what do you intend to do?" Xianxia shrugged and said, "Continue heaving to the ancient origin region. However, I'll strive to perfect the 2nd level of the origin creation technique, the apotheosis realm, before that. In that way, we can rely on the energy from the 9 moons to experience another tremendous improvement of our strengths." Ming couldn't help but ask, "What about me? What should I do?" Xianxia was stunned, and then he smiled as he said, "Just cultivate and take care of Meng." Ming said with a slightly helpless expression, "Since I've started cultivating until now, It's the first time I've noticed that I'm like a useless fellow who is of no help. Xianxia hurriedly said, a key figure naturally has to make an appearance at the key moment. Don't undervalue yourself. After all, if we enter ancient origin region and are unable to avoid conflict with King Gu Yuan, then I would need your help. Ming glanced at him and said, I never expected that you would be rather skilled at consoling others. As she finished speaking, even she couldn't help but smile. Under the veil of night, the light blue moonlight made her clear, fair, and gorgeous face seem extraordinary pure and otherworldly. Their group didn't waste any more time, and they continued on their journey during the night. Presently, the situation was completely different. The three supreme kings of Origin World were acting unusually and hadn't shown themselves again. Moreover, the living beings of Origin World had received Xianxia's kindness, and they'd already unconsciously changed their attitude towards Xianxia. Under such circumstances, Xianxia's group naturally didn't have to continue going into hiding when night arrived. In a pitch-black, lofty, and grand hall, King Luo sat cross-legged on the ground in a black cloak, and he was holding a piece of beast skin in his hand as he read it carefully while occasionally praising in a void that was almost impossible to hear. He'd obtained the first level of the Chrysalis Realm's cultivation technique as well, and for the sake of studying it carefully, he'd even gotten a piece of beast skin and copied the cultivation technique on it. In these past few days, he hadn't left his residence at all, and he'd been constantly studying the cultivation technique. Of course, with the strength he possessed right now, this first level of the Chrysalis Realm wasn't suitable for him since a very long time ago, but it didn't stop King Luo's fervor to devote himself to study it. After all, it was also his first time seeing such a cultivation technique that could be cultivated by any living being in the origin world. Extraordinary. It's clear and easy to understand yet compact and ingenious. It's absolutely impossible to create such a technique without possessing extraordinary wisdom and supreme ability. I wonder how exactly that outsider accomplished this. He was actually able to study the cultivation of origin energy in such a comprehensive manner. King Luo couldn't help but praise again. He'd studied it carefully no less than 100 times, but he noticed something new every single time he looked through it, and it constantly made him feel like it was completely fresh and inconceivable. Could it be that all the cultivators in the outside world have attained such an inconceivable state? King Luo sighed occasionally with emotion, and he was slightly unable to accept that this cultivation technique had been created by an outsider. Is this the change you were talking about? Right at this moment, a heavy voice that resounded like a bell rumbled like a thunderclap from outside the hall. However, King Luo seemed as if he was completely aware of this, and his expression didn't change at all. He casually folded the beast skin together and said, "Yes. How is it? Has it exceeded your expectations?" His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when an expanse of dazzling golden light surged outside the hall and suddenly transformed into the form of a man that was around 6 m tall, robust like a small hill, had completely blazing golden hair, and was extremely ferocious. King Luo couldn't help but chuckle when he witnessed this scene. King Jiuling, I never expected that a proud fellow like you would actually take the form of a human cultivator like I have. Obviously, the golden-haired man was surprisingly the 9-headed lion, King Jiuling. He strode into the hall with large strides while a golden glow suffused his eyes, and he revealed impressive divine might. He stared at King Luo and said, "Do you know that King Gu Yuan hasn't shown himself for 7 days now?" King Luo stood up and placed his hands behind his back as he gazed out of the hall, and the outline of the 9 moons could be faintly seen there. "Of course I do. The change that old fellow was most worried about has occurred, and it's impossible for him to stop it. I guess that he's probably in an agitated state right now." King Luo suddenly turned around while a wisp of fervor arose in his eyes. "This means that our opportunity is almost here. King Jiuling, could it be that you aren't looking forward to obtaining the core of Origin World?" King Jiuling remained silent for a short moment before he said in a low voice, "But what if King Gu Yuan kills those 2 human cultivators?" King Luo suddenly started laughing. He withdrew the beast skin that had the first level of the Chrysalis Realm recorded on it and spoke slowly. Do you think someone who created such a technique would be easily killed by King Guyuan? King Jiuling thought for a moment before he tacitly approved of King Emoluo's views. Even until now, I'm still curious about exactly how that fellow created such a cultivation technique. If I was able to possess such a technique when I started cultivating all those years ago, then I would have probably possessed the strength to kill King Guyuan and seize the core of Origin World. King Emoluo sighed with emotion. I'm sure that it hasn't just been me. Both you and King Guyuan have tried to create some cultivation techniques for the residents of the Origin World. Unfortunately, we still haven't been able to succeed. When he spoke up to hear, he shook his head and said, No, the cultivation techniques we created were only suitable for a single type of being to cultivate, and it couldn't be cultivated by all living beings. Just like that cultivation technique I created for the golden armored ant king. King Jiuling frowned and said, You seem to place too much importance onto this origin creation technique. King Emoluo's gaze was deep and carried a rare solemn expression. No, you don't understand. A single cultivation technique isn't a big deal. However, its appearance represents a completely new path of cultivation, and it's extremely likely to overturn the current situation in the Origin World and form a true cultivation system. That is the most terrifying part about this cultivation technique. King Jiuling laughed with ridicule and said, So what? Cultivation depends on our respective natural talent, physique, and comprehension ability. Isn't it a little too absurd to say that a single cultivation technique can change the entire situation in the Origin World? King Emoluo sighed. Could it be that you really can't figure it out? Perhaps the effects of this cultivation technique can't be seen right now, but once these living beings have cultivated the origin creation technique for 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years, then do you think the situation within the Origin World would still remain the same? King Emoluo spoke with a certain tone before King Jiuling could speak. I guarantee that if the origin creation technique continues to be spread and cultivated, then even more formidable existences would definitely appear within the Origin World, and it's even very likely that existences who can rival us will appear. King Jiuling's expression finally turned serious, and it was even slightly heavy. He frowned as he said, This doesn't seem to be a good thing to the two of us. King Emoluo nodded and said, Of course. Fortunately, that's a matter of the future, and we don't have to wait until then. King Jiuling said, What do you mean? A wisp of a secretive smile arose on the corners of King Emoluo's mouth. Don't forget that this change has only just begun, and those two outsiders are still alive. King Jiuling's gaze flickered for a long time before he said, How so? King Emoluo pointed at the beast's skin in his hand. This is merely a part of that cultivation technique. If I'm not wrong, then that human cultivator should possess even more parts of it that he hasn't give out. In an instant, King Jiuling's heart shook. You've realized as well? King Emoluo glanced at him and said indifferently, King Jiuling, you've been feigning ignorance since you entered this hall of mine. We can't continue discussing the matter if you continue acting in this way. King Jiuling chuckled while a wisp of slyness flashed through the depths of his eyes. I did that because I wasn't sure of your attitude towards the method. King Emoluo grunted and said, I want to hear your thoughts. King Jiuling hesitated for a moment before he said, What do you think I would do? King Emoluo's eyes narrowed slightly. He stared at King Jiuling for a long time before he grinned and said, I understand now. You don't just want to kill King Guyuan, nor do you only want to share the core of Origin World with me. Most importantly, you want to seize the cultivation. King Jiuling roared with laughter before King Emoluo could finish speaking. In the entire Origin World, only you, King Emoluo, understand me. King Emoluo spoke indifferently. However, I have to remind you that it isn't the right time to deal with them yet. King Jiuling deeply agreed. Of course, we naturally have to be patient if we want to obtain the complete origin creation technique. King Emoluo grinned. As long as you understand. As they spoke, these two supreme kings of the Origin World couldn't help but exchange glances, and then they roared with laughter that surged through the hall. At the same time, in the ancient Origin region, an aged voice sighed with emotion within the verdant valley. Master, the situation is out of control. It was King Gu Yuan's voice. That dark blue, pure, brilliant, and dazzling ball of light was still floating in front of that towering ancient tree, and it emanated a gentle, clear, ancient, and primitive aura. The origin creation technique actually possesses the momentum to make history in the entire origin world. Such a change is truly something this old servant is unable to stop. Based on the current situation, I can only do everything possible to kill those outsiders and put a complete end to the source of these changes. Perhaps I'll be able to turn the situation around a little once that's done. King Gu Yuan's voice carried a wisp of sorrow and rage that couldn't be concealed, and it even revealed a wisp of extreme resolution and killing intent. Master, once you awaken, this old servant. King Gu Yuan hadn't been able to finish speaking because a trace of an almost imperceptible ripple had suddenly arisen from the ball of light that was dark blue and pure like a gem. King Gu Yuan was an extraordinary figure, so even such a tiny change was unable to escape his eyes. So, his voice had stopped abruptly while indescribable excitement surged through his heart. Master, have you heard this old servant? King Gu Yuan's voice trembled slightly. He was too shocked and surprised. He'd never imagined that his master that had been deathly silent for countless years would actually reveal a trace of fluctuation at this moment. Swish! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the surroundings when numerous fluctuations ripples out from within the dark blue ball of light, and these fluctuations emanated an extremely ancient and primitive aura. King Gu Yuan was utterly stunned. It's real. It really happened. It was utterly impossible to use words to describe King Gu Yuan's current state of mind. He was excited, overjoyed, dazed, shocked. All sorts of emotions exploded from him like a volcano that had been deathly silent for ages, because he hadn't sensed the existence of his master for too long. It was so long ago that he'd even started to doubt whether his master had completely ceased to exist. Yet now, King Gu Yuan had finally confirmed that his master hadn't left, and his master had always been here. Right when King Gu Yuan's emotions surged and he was practically on the verge of losing control, a strand of will that was weak to the point of being almost imperceptible had surged into his heart. After that, King Gu Yuan's entire body suddenly stiffened when he understood the intentions of that strand of will. It was like he'd been struck by lightning, and he cried out involuntarily, "Master, why?" A month later, a violent volcano appeared in the horizon. The mountain range in their fields of vision rose and fell, and it was completely crimson red. Eternally surging flames blazed upon the entire mountain range, and it even made the sky there completely red while the space there was burned to the point of warping and being thrown into disorder. Just looking at it from afar made one feel hot. It was like an oppressive and blazing aura was being emanated by it, and it was suffocating. We're finally almost there. She took a deep breath while his gaze blazed with anticipation. After traveling for over a month, he'd finally caught sight of this volcano, and they would enter ancient origin region upon traversing the volcano. I just never expected that King Mo Luo would actually not act against us until now. It's truly quite unusual. Ming pondered deeply before he spoke these words. It's extremely normal. I've spoken about it in the past. Perhaps this is exactly what King Mo Luo wants. She spoke indifferently. Do you really intend to act according to his will and enter the ancient origin region? Asked Ming. We can't turn back anymore. Perhaps the moment we decide not to enter ancient origin region will be the moment that King Mo Luo himself takes action. She shrugged and said, even though it's very uncomfortable to be forced by circumstances, but what can we do? We're still unable to go against them, so this is our only choice. Ming asked, then do you think that King Gu Yuan will let us enter his territory? We'll know after we give it a try. She seemed to be very indifferent. However, only he knew that they had no other choice regardless of how dangerous it was. It was truly aggrieving to be forced to make such decisions. The only thing she consoled She was that he'd fully perfected the 5 level of the apotheosis realm, which was the 2nd level of the origin creation technique. Moreover, he'd tried cultivating it himself and hadn't encountered any danger. So in She's opinion, it was undoubtedly something worthy of celebrating. Because with the Apotheosis Realm's cultivation technique, he would be able to recover his combat strength at the Region Lord Realm in an extremely short period of time. At that time, he would at least have no need to be fearful or be forced to flee like he was doing right now. At this very moment, his combat strength had already recovered to the world-enlightened True God realm. Even Ming was standing proudly at the peak of the Immortal King realm, and she was only a thread away from recovering her combat strength as an expert of the God rank realm. All of this had occurred in this month. It seemed to be simple, but it was extremely difficult to accomplish for Xianxia and Ming, who were constantly traveling. Besides that, the atmosphere in the entire origin world had undergone a tremendous change during this month of time. After the first level of the Chrysalis realm had been disseminated into the world, Xianxia had successively passed down the second to the 9th level of the Chrysalis realm to the Thunderbird Emerald, and then Emerald disseminated it successively. Just like that, 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. At this point in time, the living beings in every single area of the origin world had obtained the complete cultivation technique of all 9 levels of the Chrysalis realm. Along with this, practically all the living beings in the entire origin world had come to remember Xianxia's name. Moreover, their respect and reverence towards him had even arrived at an unprecedented height. At this point in time, he'd even surpassed King Mo Luo, King Jiuling, and King Gu Yuan's reputations. The benefit from all of this was that no matter where Xianxia went, there wasn't a single living being that would notify King Mo Luo of his arrival or go against him. It was even to the extent that for the sake of allowing Xianxia's group to enter the ancient origin region as soon as possible, many living beings they passed on the way had even earnestly provided Xianxia with guidance on the closest route, and they'd even given him all sorts of precious treasures to express their gratitude and respect to Xianxia. The mountain range extended continuously into the distance while seething with flames that even turned the sky red. Xianxia didn't have the time to indulge in his thoughts. He led Ming and Meng Meng through space as he flashed towards the volcano. Bang! Suddenly, a 30 kilometers tall fiery red figure had suddenly appeared from the depths of the volcano, and it towered into the sky. It seemed to be completely formed from lava, and it emanated surging divine flames. It was an enormous lava beast. Based on its aura, its combat strength was at least on par with a domain-enlightened spirit god. Swoosh! Xianxia stopped moving, and he had a solemn expression yet didn't reveal any panic. As soon as they arrived here, he'd already noticed that an enormous lava beast which had cultivated for countless years was residing here. The only thing he hadn't expected was that this enormous lava beast would actually show itself before they even got close to the volcano. The ancient origin region is a restricted area. I advise all of you to avoid heading there. The enormous lava beast spoke with a heavy voice. Its enormous figure was like a brilliant ocean of fire as it stood before the volcano, and it revealed terrifying divine might. However, Xianxia and the others hadn't expected that the enormous lava beast would actually warn them to not enter ancient origin region after it showed itself. "What if we insist?" asked Xianxia in a calm voice. The enormous lava beast remained silent for a long time before it suddenly sighed and said, "You've bestowed a great kindness upon the myriad of living beings in the origin world, so I naturally won't stop you." Just these words alone displayed that the enormous lava beast had been clearly aware of Xianxia's identity, and it had heard of all the changes that had occurred recently throughout the origin world. "Thank you." Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. "Looks like your decision to spread the origin creation technique was correct." Ming spoke via voice transmission, and she seemed to be speaking with heartfelt admiration. Xianxia shrugged and said, "This can only prove that these residents of the origin world know how to repay a favor, and they are much better than the cultivators of the outside world." As they spoke, Xianxia's group had set out and flashed towards the volcano. Xianxia was originally a little worried that the enormous lava beast would suddenly change its mind. However, the outcome proved that his worries were unnecessary. Since they approached the volcano until they brushed past the enormous lava beast, it had been constantly silent and hadn't made even the slightest movement. However, right when Xianxia and the others were about to traverse the volcano in one go, the lava beast's heavy voice resounded from behind them. "Outsider, I have some words to give you before we part ways. Xianxia was stunned, and then he swiftly turned his head around and said, Please go ahead. Even though strength can subdue the world, only wisdom can change it. I hope you'll be able to stay fine and well. As soon as it finished speaking, the lava beast's entire body transformed into a surging torrent of fire that vanished within the depths of the volcano. I will. She couldn't help but smile when he saw this, and then he turned around and left with Ming and Mengmeng. A few hours later, an ancient and dense forest appeared in their fields of vision. The leaves on the towering tree rustled along with the wind, and they extended endlessly towards the distance. We're finally here. Xianxia's figure flashed and stopped at the edge of the luxuriant forest. Once he finished checking for danger in the surroundings, Xianxia sat down at the bottom of a tree and stretched his body. This was the ancient origin region, and it meant that they'd completely escaped the scope of the Brink region and didn't have to worry about being pursued by King Mo. The ancient origin region belongs to King Gu Yuan, but it's called the forbidden area of the origin world, so we still can't relax completely. Ming sat casually by Xianxia's side. Her jet-black hair had been tied into a bun, causing her snow-white, long, and slender neck to be completely revealed along with her cold, aloof, and gorgeous face. Every single move she made had a trace of an otherworldly aura, and she seemed exceptionally moving, like she'd emerged from within a painting. At this moment, her slender and fair arms were wrapped around her knees while her clear eyes gazed into the distance, and the sideways view of her seemingly carved face carried a practically flawless and picturesque feel to it. Indeed, according to rumor, King Gu Yuan is the most mysterious amongst the three supreme kings of the origin world. At the same time, he's the incomparable #1 expert of the origin world. Now that we've come to his territory to take shelter, we'll probably be noticed by him sooner or later. She spoke casually. However, I'm not worried. So long as we make the best use of our time and recover our combat strengths, then the situation we're in will only get more and more safer. The veil of night had silently descended as they spoke. Just as before, the 9 dark blue moons had soared into the sky and emanated a divine glow, while the living beings below left their nests and howled incessantly. At this instant, Xianxia and Ming were able to sense at least 10 types of living beings within the dense forest absorbing the origin energy essence emanated by the moon, and they were surprisingly cultivating the origin creation technique that Xianxia had created. Xianxia and Ming couldn't help but exchange glances and smile at each other. They didn't hesitate to flash over to the peak of an ancient tree, and then they casually sat down cross-legged on a larger verdant lead before they circulated the origin creation technique and started cultivating as well. Throughout the nights of the past month, King Mo, King Zhouling, and King Gu Yuan still hadn't shown themselves again. Their disappearance meant that the origin energy essence which descended from the 9 moons would completely rain down into the world, and it nurtured all things and was absorbed by all the living beings that resided here. On the other hand, the reason Xianxia and Ming's combat strengths had transformed so quickly was closely linked to this change as well. If they weren't worried about the dangers that might arise, the two of them would be only too anxious to charge into the sky and occupy a superb position to absorb the origin energy essence from the moon. In that way, their combat strengths would recover even more quickly. However, this night seems to be unlike any other night before this. Swish! Not long after Xianxia and Ming had just started cultivating, an expanse of dazzling emerald green light surged into appearance beneath the night sky and covered the heavens and the earth. After that, it transformed into a strong and towering ancient tree that was filled with an ancient and dignified aura. Surprisingly, it was King Gu Yuan who'd vanished for over a month of time. Why? Has he suddenly made an appearance? Xianxia and Ming were shocked. They immediately stopped cultivating while they felt quite surprised in their hearts. They didn't know what King Gu Yuan's sudden appearance this time represented. It wasn't just them. Even the myriad of living beings throughout Origin World couldn't help but become agitated, surprised, and anxious when they saw King Gu Yuan's figure appear once more beneath the night sky. The most inconceivable thing to them was that once King Gu Yuan appeared beneath the sky, he hadn't cultivated as he'd done in the past. He just stood there in midair and remained silent for a long time before he suddenly spoke with an extremely indifferent voice. Mo Luo, Jiuling, show yourselves. I've already figures it out, and it's time to put an end to everything. His voice was like a thunderclap that resounded throughout Origin World. It was filled with a dignified tone that made the hearts of all the living beings throughout Origin World tremble, and it made them feel a suffocating pressure descend upon them. Put an end to it? Put an end to what? Qian Shi and Ming's expressions had become solemn as they faintly sensed that what King Gu Yuan intended to do upon showing himself this time was probably related to them. The atmosphere throughout the heavens and the earth had become tense. It was like a storm was about to arrive, and it was filled with a confrontational aura. King Gu Yuan, what exactly are you saying? After a short moment of silence, an expanse of dazzling golden light appeared in the horizon, and then it swiftly transformed into a 9-headed lion whose entire body surged with golden light and emanated peerless divine might. It was exactly King Jiuling. At practically the exact same moment, a completely pitch-black flying beast that covered an area of around 10 kilometers shot into the sky, and then it appeared by King Jiuling's side. It was naturally King Mo Luo. On the first night when Chen's group had arrived within ancient Origin World, the 3 supreme kings who hadn't shown themselves for over a month had actually appeared in succession. This scene clearly seemed unusual. It wasn't just Qian Shi and Ming who experienced unprecedented pressure. Even the myriad of living beings that resided in the surroundings had unconsciously stopped cultivating and were slightly anxious and fearful. What exactly is going on? King Gu Yuan, exactly what do you intend to put an end to by summoning us here? King Mo Luo spoke in a low voice that carried a trace of vigilance. Obviously, he was unable to see through King Gu Yuan's thoughts. The change. King Gu Yuan's voice was indifferent, determined, and carried a strand of resolution. What change? King Jiuling's expression changed slightly as he faintly sensed that the situation was bad. Don't the two of you want the core of Origin World? I'll give both of you a chance to join forces and seize it from me right now. King Gu Yuan's voice remained indifferent and didn't carry any fluctuations of emotion. The core of Origin World? What's that? Both Qian Shi and Ming frowned. They'd originally thought that King Gu Yuan's appearance was related to them, but now it would seem like the matter was even more complicated. Haha. Yes, we are really attracted to the core of Origin World, but I presume King Gu Yuan has misunderstood. We have no intention to try and seize it from you. King Mo Luo roared with laughter. Exactly. Don't think too much about it, King Gu Yuan. Even though some changes have occurred in the Origin World, it might not cause an actual change to the Origin World. King Jiuling added. Obviously, both King Mo Luo and King Jiuling weren't willing to fight King Gu Yuan right now, because according to their plans, this change had only just begun and hadn't matured, so it wasn't suitable to shed all pretenses with King Gu Yuan right now. There's no need to put on an act. My consciousness awoke when the Origin World was just born, and I've experienced countless years along with it. So, how could anything that occurred within the Origin World possibly avoid my detection? King Gu Yuan's voice was aged and indifferent. In the beginning, I was thinking of giving the two of you a chance to live. After all, you've helped me maintain a good amount of order in the Origin World throughout the years. Unfortunately, this change allowed me to suddenly realize that keeping the two of you alive would only bring harm to the Origin World. In an instant, King Mo Luo and King Jiuling's expressions changed. They seemed to dare not believe that King Gu Yuan had actually showed himself to kill them. Even Qian Shi and Ming couldn't help but feel slightly stunned when they heard this. Because it was they who had caused this change, so why did King Gu Yuan intend to kill King Mo Luo and King Jiuling instead? Why? King Mo Luo spoke in a low voice. At this moment, he'd completely recovered his calm. For the sake of the Origin World. King Gu Yuan replied in an indifferent tone. Swish. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when space surged, and then an emerald green branch seemed like a chain of order as it soared through the sky and struck forcefully towards King Mo Luo. Swish. It was a verdant branch from King Gu Yuan's body, yet it seemed like a divine chain or order that carried the terrifying might of the Heaven Tao as it tore the ink-black sky apart, causing the entire world to turn green. You think you can kill me? Dream on. King Mo Luo laughed coldly as he flapped his wings, and it was like a veil that dropped down from the sky and released a myriad of black gales that rumbled as they smashed over. Bang! The collision between them was simply like a collision between the sun and moon. It shook the world and caused blazing divine radiance to spray throughout the surroundings. It was like numerous meteors were crashing to the ground. These two supreme experts had actually entered into battle. This was an unprecedented incident. All the living beings within Origin World were shocked. They felt extraordinary terror as they fled madly while feeling deeply afraid of being struck by the aftershock of this battle. Rumble. Numerous verdant branches throughout King Gu Yuan's body swayed before the collision could come to an end, and they were like a myriad of chains that extended madly and covered the heavens and the earth. Every single branch was suffused with the divine radiance of Origin energy, and they were filled with the supreme might of the grand Tao and monstrous divine might. She couldn't help but gasp when he witnessed this scene. He'd imagined that the mysterious King Gu Yuan was very formidable, but he hadn't imagined that King Gu Yuan's combat strength would actually be formidable to such an extent. It was at least comparable to a Tao Lord, and he was unable to determine how strong King Gu Yuan was exactly. This made She practically instinctively take Ming and Meng Meng along and swiftly hid themselves. He was deeply afraid of exposing their auras in the slightest, allowing King Gu Yuan to notice them, and then bring down a calamity upon them. King Jiuling, are you still not gonna lend me a hand? You won't be able to live for long once I'm killed by this old bastard. King Mo Luo's howl that was filled with shock and rage resounded through the sky. He flapped his wings while he opened up his sharp pitch-black beak that seemed capable of devouring everything before it. But at this moment, he was clearly rather fearful of the myriad off branches that came from King Gu Yuan, and he was furious and fearful to the extreme. Humph! Old bastard! Since you intend to be so merciless, then don't blame us for joining forces. Rumble! An expanse of extremely blazing golden light erupted from King Jiuling and shot into the sky as he spoke these words. It made him seem like a divine being that possessed boundless divine might. He raised his head up, and those 9 heads of his respectively revealed an expression of happiness, anger, sorrow, resentment, greed, infatuation, grief, rage, and hatred. After that, every single head of his actually emanated a strand of blazing light, and these dazzling and gorgeous multicolored lights swept through the sky. This was King Jiuling's innate ability, 9-soul heavenly illumination. These 9 rays of light weren't just capable of tearing through the heavens and the earth. They were extremely formidable and capable of causing a lethal blow to the soul. Bang! 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 Everywhere the 9 rays of light passed as they swept through the sky exploded apart and collapsed into numerous black holes that seemed like deep abysses. It was an extremely shocking sight. King Mo Luo heaved a sigh of relief in his heart when he saw King Jiuling lend a hand, and his spirits were refreshed. Monstrous killing intent surged from him as he started to cooperate with King Jiuling to launch a full-force pincer attack against King Gu Yuan. For a time, gales flowed through the sky while rays of light swept through it. It caused mountains and rivers to be broken apart and space to fall into disorder. It simply seemed like the end of the world had arrived. Everything was in chaos and disorder. On the ground of Origin World, all the living beings were fleeing in terror while shivering, and their entire bodies were drowned in boundless fear. They'd lived and cultivated here for countless years, but they'd never witnessed an actual battle between these 3 supreme kings of the Origin World. Moreover, it was such an intense battle that raged with killing intent. It seemed like they refused to stop until one party to the battle died, and this made all the living beings here feel anxious and uneasy. On the other hand, Xianxia's group had moved far away from that expanse of the sky, and they similarly carried extremely solemn expressions because everything that happened tonight was unexpected to them as well. Rumble. The battle in the sky grew even more intense. Divine radiance whistled through the sky, and it was dangerous yet gorgeous. This was a battle of the Origin World, and it was Origin energy and the laws of Origin World that were utilized in the battle. Even though the method of combat varied from the outside world, the destruction it created was still shocking. In next to no time, Xianxia noticed something interesting, and it further proved an inference he had. Regardless of whether it was King Mo Luo, King Zhouling, or King Gu Yuan, practically all the abilities they utilized in battle had come from within their bloodlines. It was like the innate divine ability that a divine beast of the outside world inherited. It was a unique technique that came from within the bloodline, and it allowed them to fully display their might. However, it was precisely because of this that their methods of combat seemed to be too simple. So, the gaining an advantage in the battle depended entirely on the strength they possessed and not the level of the combat techniques they possessed. All of this allowed Xianxia to fully understand that a cultivation system really hadn't been born within the origin world, and this meant that it was impossible for sex and inheritances to exist. It was naturally impossible to possess any combat techniques and secret techniques without perfected inheritances. In the outside world, one of the important conditions to judge a sect's resources and reserves was usually the might of the techniques passed down within it. Obviously, all of this hadn't been born within the origin world yet. After all, King Mo Luo, King Zhouling, and King Gu Yuan were the three strongest beings in the origin world, yet even they had been unable to comprehend and grasp various techniques, so it clearly showed how crude and practically bare the state of cultivation in the origin world was. Do the two of you think that you can seize the core of origin world from me with just that bit of strength? Right when Xianxia seemed to have attained some understanding, King Gu Yuan's indifferent and dignified voice had suddenly resounded in the sky. After that, Xianxia saw that King Gu Yuan had suddenly arrived at the center of the 9 moons in the sky. When looked at from afar, the 9 dark blue moons seemed to have transformed into a backdrop that made King Gu Yuan seem even more lofty and unfathomable. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, the luxuriant branches on King Gu Yuan's towering figure had suddenly spread out like an umbrella being unfolded, and they formed a completely round and verdant barrier of light. As soon as that glistening, translucent, and flawless covered the heavens and the earth, it actually fully drew over the origin energy essence that was emanated from the 9 moons and caused them to surge into King Gu Yuan's body. For a time, his entire body was suffused by dark blue light, causing him to seem mysterious and divine, while his imposing aura rose to its limits. At this instant, even Xianxia had the misconception that King Gu Yuan had transformed into the heaven Tao of this world and reigned supreme over it. Shit! King Mo Luo muttered in his heart while his expression changed, and coldness swept through his body. You have actually started to take control of the order of the heaven Tao. King Zhouling seemed as if he'd seen the impossible and couldn't help but cry out involuntarily. That damnable old bastard actually hid so much. King Mo Luo roared. King Zhouling, if we still don't fight desperately, then both of us will perish at this old bastard's hands. As he roared, his pitch-black wings suddenly blazed with surging black flames, and they swept fiercely, creating an expanse of fiery gales. Kill! King Zhouling roared loudly while 9 rays of light shot from his 9 heads. They actually fused together to form a thick and large gray ray of divine light, and it shot forward with the intention of stopping King Gu Yuan from utilizing the energy of the heaven Tao. Right at this moment, King Gu Yuan attacked. A verdant branch that was over 30 kilometers long carried the dark blue and dreamlike energy from the order of the heaven Tao as it tore through space and swept forward lightly. Bang! The black fiery gales that King Mo Luo created were blasted into pieces, and they transformed into a rain of light that scattered into the air. After that, King Mo Luo didn't even have the chance to react before the verdant branch had coiled around his neck. The dark blue energy of order moved along the verdant branch and extended into King Mo Luo's enormous figure. No! King Mo Luo was like a prisoner who couldn't struggle free, and he was overwhelmed by terror, causing a heart-rending shriek to erupt from his mouth. The order of the heaven Tao extended incessantly, causing the energy within King Mo Luo's entire body to be ceaselessly destroyed, while the vitality within his body suffered irreparable damage. I admit defeat. I admit defeat. I sweat that I will never go against you again. Please spare me this time. King Mo Luo roared loudly with a pleading tone. However, King Gu Yuan seemed to be extremely cold and indifferent at this moment, and he shook the branch that had coiled around King Mo Luo. In an instant, the latter's body seemed like a piece of paper that exploded into pieces, and it transformed into divine radiance that scattered through the surroundings. A supreme expert of the origin world had actually been killed just like that. It was such a pity. He'd made countless plans and had intended to rely on this change in the origin world to scheme for the core of origin world. But in the end, he hadn't even had the chance to put his plan into practice before he perished. It was truly pitiable indeed. As it was said, no matter how great a plan was, it couldn't resist absolute strength. Even if he was merely watching from afar, Xianxia's heart couldn't help but turn cold because King Gu Yuan's combat strength was simply too formidable and beyond imagination. Rumble. Along with the death of King Luo, King Jiuling's expression had changed completely, and he was horrified to the point his soul almost left his body. He didn't dare continue struggling at all, and he practically instinctively turned around and fled. He didn't dare go against King Gu Yuan anymore. It was too terrifying. He'd known King Gu Yuan since a very long time ago, yet he'd never imagined that King Gu Yuan's combat strength would actually be so formidable. Obviously, King Gu Yuan had concealed a huge amount of his strength during these years, and that was the reason this current situation had been created. If he knew that King Gu Yuan was so formidable, then no matter how brave he was, King Jiuling wouldn't dare to rashly promise King Luo to join forces against King Gu Yuan. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world, and King Gu Yuan was determined to kill them this time. Swish! Right at the instant that King Jiuling had fled, numerous verdant branches carried glistening dark blue divine radiance as they coiled around King Jiuling's 9 heads. After that, a wave of explosions resounded as King Jiuling's 9 heads had actually been crushed apart, causing a rain of blood to descend through the air. Even until the moment of his death, King Jiuling didn't even have the chance to let out a shrill cry. Thump! This scene horrified the myriad of living beings throughout Origin World. Their figures froze on the spot while they couldn't help but drop on their knees while shivering without end. On the other hand, Xianxia and Ming couldn't help but gasp while a heavy expression crept onto their faces. In just a short moment, 2 supreme experts had been slaughtered, and this clearly showed how terrifying King Gu Yuan was. They even suspected that they would probably be far from being a match for King Gu Yuan even if they recovered their previous combat strengths. So, have the 2 of you finished watching? Right at this moment, a dignified voice suddenly rumbled like a thunderclap from King Gu Yuan who stood in midair, and it surged and rumbled by Xianxia and Ming's ears. In an instant, Xianxia and Ming's entire bodies felt cold as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. Obviously, King Gu Yuan had noticed their existence a long time ago. Moreover, after they witnessed King Gu Yuan slaughter both King Luo and King Jiuling by himself, it allowed Xianxia and Ming to fully realize how terrifying King Gu Yuan was. Now, King Gu Yuan had actually suddenly turned his attention to them after he completed such a slaughter. And it was shocking. What does he intend to do? Xianxia didn't know the answer to that, but he'd practically instinctively become vigilant. Every single inch of skin throughout his body tensed up like a completely drawn bow that was accumulating strength and waiting to be fired. Clang! Ming was even more direct. She withdrew the dark golden pike that Xianxia had crafted for her. She held it tightly in her hand while her clear pitch-black eyes were filled with a murderous and cold expression. The rain of blood from King Jiuling's corpse was still drifting down from the sky, and it was gorgeous yet horrifying and bloody, while beneath the illumination of the dark blue moonlight, the myriad of living beings on the ground were lying flat on the ground while shivering with terror and uneasiness. However, they'd possessed intelligence for a very long time, so how could they be unable to discern that King Gu Yuan was speaking to Xianxia and Ming? When they thought about how the origin creation technique that had spread throughout the origin world and was publicly acknowledged by all of them as a supreme divine scripture had been disseminated by Xianxia, yet Xianxia was being targeted by King Gu Yuan right now. All of the living beings in the origin world couldn't help but feel quite worried. They admired and idolized him, and they were filled with extreme gratitude towards Xianxia's actions of spreading the origin creation technique. So, if it were any other time, they would definitely stand by Xianxia's side without the slightest hesitation to help him and support him. Yet now they were unable to act in that way, because Xianxia's opponent was King Gu Yuan, the most mysterious and formidable supreme expert throughout the entire origin world. Just moments ago, even existences like King Mo Luo and King Jiuling had been successively killed by King Gu Yuan in a short moment. Under such circumstances, would anyone dare to step forward? This was what being compelled by circumstances meant. King Gu Yuan's thick and towering figure stood in the sky while his myriad of verdant and luxuriant branches were suffused with a divine aura of origin energy. When looked at from afar, he actually gave others a dignified and oppressive feeling of having transformed into the heavens and looking down upon all living beings in the origin world. Since you've finished watching, then it's time to put an end to the matter between us as well. King Gu Yuan spoke once more with a voice that was still cold and indifferent, and it shook the hearts of all the living beings within the origin world. Could King Gu Yuan really be intending to kill Xianxia? Just a little while ago, King Gu Yuan had said that he intended to put an end to this change for the sake of the origin world, and he'd killed King Mo Luo and King Jiuling without the slightest hesitation. At this moment, he'd spoken once more with the intention of putting an end to something between him and Xianxia's group. So, wasn't that equivalent to announcing that he intended to kill them? Xianxia and Ming had naturally heard King Gu Yuan, and their hearts couldn't help but sink. Moreover, their eyes narrowed successively while they prepared themselves to fight desperately to the death. The atmosphere became murderous and tense once more, and it seemed like a battle would erupt at any moment. Swish! Right at this moment, a myriad of strands of emerald green divine radiance suddenly surged out explosively from within King Gu Yuan, and it was extremely dazzling. When all the living beings in the world felt that King Gu Yuan intended to kill Xianxia and Ming, they noticed to their astonishment that it wasn't an attack. They saw a mighty and tall green-haired old man with a beard tied into 3 locks walking out from that expanse of dazzling and blazing emerald green divine radiance. His eyes were clear like gems and suffused with an aura of experience, and every single move he made was filled with a supreme dignified aura. Obviously, this green-haired old man was King Gu Yuan. However, to the surprise of all the living beings within the origin world, King Gu Yuan, the supreme king of the origin world, had suddenly transformed into a similar appearance as those two outsiders. Xianxia and Ming couldn't help but feel stunned, and they were unable to figure out his exact intentions. Swoosh! In next to no time, King Gu Yuan's figure vanished from the sky, and not a trace of him could be found. It made all the living beings in origin world feel dazed. What exactly is going on? Only Xianxia and Ming's heart had fallen cold, because right at this moment, the green-haired old man who King Gu Yuan had transformed into had appeared not too far away from them. Go ahead and sit. I intend to have a chat with the two of you before we put an end to the matter between us. King Gu Yuan's expression was calm as he sat casually at the side, and then he gazed at Xianxia and Ming with his deep and clear green eyes. Ming's pitch-black and beautiful brows became knitted tightly together, and she seemed to intend to attack but was restrained by a glance from Xianxia. After that, Xianxia sat on the ground and said, "What do you want to talk about?" His expression was indifferent while his actions were composure. He didn't reveal even a trace of nervousness. Moreover, even his voice was calm as water. King Gu Yuan noticed all of this, but it didn't cause any change in his expression. At the same time, Ming hesitated briefly before she puckered her lips and sat by Xianxia's side, and then she gazed vigilantly at King Gu Yuan with her clear eyes. Even though this fellow had taken the appearance of a human cultivator, it hadn't eliminated the feeling of danger that Ming had. After all, the combat strength King Gu Yuan revealed earlier was truly too formidable. I want to know how the two of you entered the origin world. According to my knowledge, even the Tao Lords of the outside world aren't able to break through the barriers of the origin world. King Gu Yuan spoke casually. If one wasn't aware of the situation, that person would probably think that they were really chatting with each other. I wouldn't have been willing to come to such a place if I wasn't forced to. Xianxia shrugged. Oh, the two of you were forced in here? King Gu Yuan seemed to be lost in thought. To be more precise, we came here by accident while being pursued, said Xianxia in a serious tone. Pursued? King Gu Yuan seemed to be surprised, and quite some time passed before he said, "So, both of you don't know how you got in here?" Xianxia nodded. He was slightly curious about why the old fellow insisted on asking such questions. Could it be that there's some sort of secret behind all of this? Young man, I've already discerned that you're unlike the other cultivators of the outside world. You're very unique, and I'm unable to see through you as well. King Gu Yuan raised his head while his clear green eyes stared at Xianxia, and his voice was low and aged. Can you tell me your identity? Xianxia suddenly smiled, and he seemed to grow even more relaxed as he said, I'm Xianxia, and I'm from Oracle Mountain in the ancient god domain. He'd discerned that King Gu Yuan seemed to have no intention to act against them now, so he'd unconsciously heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. The pressure King Gu Yuan gave him was no different than when he faced the Tao Institute's Dean Lu Xinji. So, she couldn't help but feel curious about exactly how terrifying this old fellow's strength was. King Gu Yuan shook his head. I'm not asking about that identity, but who exactly are you? When he spoke up to hear, strands of horrifying green lightly suffused his eyes. After all, it's the first time that I've seen such a destiny like yours which can't be seen through. Moreover, you the aura of a unique energy, and it's practically exactly similar to a precious treasure that I saw when my consciousness was awakened. As he finished speaking, his voice couldn't help but carry a wisp of curiosity. These words caused Xianxi's heart to shake. This old fellow's gaze is truly discerning. Could it be that he has noticed that I possess the river diagram? Xianxia maintained silence when facing this question. He was unable to answer it, and he wasn't able to provide an answer as well. A wisp of curiosity suffused King Gu Yuan's eyes when he saw this, and he seemed as if he was sighing with emotion in a daze, yet also seemed like he'd recalled scenes from far into the past. The moment my consciousness awakened was the moment that the origin world was born. At that time, there were numerous heaven daos throughout the world, and every single one of them was completely different. They collided with each other with the intention of fusing with the other. In the end, after experiencing an absolutely shocking incident, only 2 heaven daos remained in the world. King Gu Yuan's voice carried a wisp of emotion, and it caused both Xianxia and Ming to be stunned. They hadn't imagined that he would speak of such secrets. Before Xianxia and Ming could figure it out, King Gu Yuan had continued. Amongst these 2 heaven daos, one took control of the 3 dimensions and the ancient god domain, and it was called God's Bane Heaven. Practically all the heaven daos born from within the chaos had been defeated by God's Bane Heave, and they were devoured and fused into it. The other heaven dao took control of this origin world, and it was called Origin Heaven. All those years ago, it was defeated by God's Bane Heaven as well, but it hadn't been devoured and fused into it. It fell into a sealed-off state instead and existed eternally until now. When he heard up to this point, Xianxia revealed a surprised, bewildered, and solemn expression. Moreover, tempestuous waves had surged through his heart. A battle between heaven daos. It was the first time he'd heard of such shocking secrets. All those years when the chaos of the 3 dimensions had just split open, it wasn't just natural spirit treasures and various treasures that had been born from within it, there had even been numerous completely different heaven daos as well. Those heaven daos were like completely conflicted enemies that fought each other, devoured each other, and fused each other into themselves. In the end, the 3 dimensions and the ancient god domain were enveloped by the order of God's Bane Heaven, and the defeated Origin Heaven had taken the origin world as its resting place while in a completely sealed-off state. If what King Gu Yuan said is true, then doesn't it mean that the passage of the 8 eras, the changes in the 3 dimensions, the situation in the ancient god domain, everything is progressing while beneath the energy of God's Bane Heaven? It's even to the extent that while the divine Tao protector clans are protecting the Godrank Mountain, they are actually protecting the God's Bane Heaven? All of these secrets were related to the secrets of the Heaven Tao, and it was the first time she had heard of it. So, he was shocked to the point he found it difficult to digest. He was truly unable to imagine how the evolution of the Heaven Tao hadn't been reflected in the passage of the eras and alternation in the world. It was even reflected in the battle between Heaven Daos that had occurred all those years ago. It wasn't just Xianxia, even Ming had fallen into a long period of shock, and she was unable to recover from it because it was simply too shocking. Why did you tell us all of this? Xianxia took a deep breath after quite some time passed, and then he gazed at King Gu Yuan. At this moment, He was sure that King Gu Yuan was clearly an innate god who'd been born from within the chaos of the three dimensions, and he possessed an extraordinary background as well. Otherwise, it would be utterly impossible for King Gu Yuan to be aware of such secrets. Why would King Gu Yuan tell them all of this? Ming was puzzled by it. Could it be that he doesn't intend to kill us? King Gu Yuan stood up, placed his hands behind his back, and then gazed at the 9 dark blue moons in the sky. He remained silent for a long time before he said in a light voice, "Everything is for the sake of Origin World." For the sake of Origin World? Chun Shi and Ming were stunned. They clearly remembered that King Gu Yuan had spoken these exact words when he killed King Mo Luo and King Jiling just now. King Gu Yuan turned to glance at the two of them before he said, "Your arrival brought new change to the Origin World. In the past, I would have definitely killed the two of you at the first possible moment in order to stop such change from occurring. But now..." When he spoke up to hear, a wisp of sorrow and loneliness suddenly suffused his indifferent and dignified face. "It's impossible to change all of that even if I kill both of you." Chun Shi's eyes narrowed while he felt slightly surprised and bewildered. Exactly what made an existence like him change his mind? "Can you let me see the entire origin creation technique that you've created?" Suddenly, King Gu Yuan gazed at Chun Shi, and he seemed to be asking, yet it seemed even more like a command. Ming's heart constricted, and she indicated with her gaze that Chun Shi shouldn't do as King Gu Yuan said. However, Chun Shi smiled and indicated that she should relax, and then he transmitted the 5 levels of the apotheosis realm to King Gu Yuan. In an instant, King Gu Yuan fell into deep thought while he looked through the secrets of the origin creation technique. "Why did you do that?" Ming sent a voice transmission to Chen Shi and seemed slightly puzzled. "To protect our lives." Chun Shi answered swiftly, "If this old fellow intended to kill us, then it would be as easy as crushing 2 ants. If we want to leave with our lives, then we can only utilize other methods. But if he..." Ming was slightly worried. "It has already come to this, so we can only risk it." Chen Shi indicated that she should stay calm. His intuition faintly told him that King Gu Yuan would probably not act against them. Meanwhile, a wisp of shock had appeared on King Gu Yuan's composed face, and then it transformed into a dazed expression. But in merely an instant, it transformed into an expression of joy instead. In the end, he seemed as if he'd gained some sort of enlightenment, and a wisp of heartfelt admiration couldn't help but arise in the space between his brows. "No wonder. I finally understand." A long time later, a wisp of divine light suddenly surged into appeared from within King Gu Yuan's eyes, and then he sighed with emotion as if numerous emotions were accumulated within it. "Young man, what sort of effect do you think this cultivation technique will bring to the origin world?" King Gu Yuan gazed at Chun Shi with a rare expression of seriousness. "It'll establish a completely new cultivation system and establish sex for the future generation. 100 schools of thought would compete in the beginning. In the end, it will form flourishing age of cultivation where sects are as numerous as trees in a forest and all sorts of techniques prosper." Chun Shi spoke without giving it the slightest thought. After all, it was a technique that he'd created, so he was naturally clearly aware of the changes it would bring to the situation within the origin world once it was spread through the origin world. 100 schools of thought compete, sects as numerous as trees in a forest, all sorts of techniques prosper. King Gu Yuan muttered word by word while his gaze gradually lit up to a brilliant state, and it was like tempestuous waves were surging through his heart. "Please come with me to a place. All right?" King Gu Yuan's gaze blazed with anticipation as he gazed at Chun Shi and Ming. "No," Ming shook her head, and it caused King Gu Yuan to be unable to help but frown. However, Ming quickly continued, "We have to bring Meng Meng along." "Meng Meng?" King Gu Yuan was stunned. Chun Shi pointed at Meng Meng, who was hiding in the distance, with her entire head buried in the ground, while her body shivered with uneasiness. "She's talking about it. Air." Even if it was an extraordinary figure like King Gu Yuan, he couldn't help but be stunned and not know whether to laugh or cry when he noticed that this Meng Meng was actually just a horned rabbit. "Let's go." King Gu Yuan flicked his sleeve. He didn't ask for their opinion again, and he brought the three of them along as he vanished on the spot. At that emerald green valley within the ancient origin region, a wave of spatial fluctuation arose before King Guyuan. Chun Shi and the others suddenly appeared here. King Guyuan spoke casually. "This is where I cultivate." Chun Shi and the others couldn't help but feel bewildered. Why would King Guyuan bring us here? I presume that all of you've realized that I hold no ill intent towards all of you, and it's even to the extent that I've asked all of you here to bestow a supreme fortune to you. King Guyuan seemed to have seen through the trace of worry in Chan Shi and Ming's hearts, and he spoke indifferently. A supreme fortune? Hearing such words once more wasn't able to make Chun Shi feel too much. He'd experienced too much during these years, and he'd obtained numerous supreme fortunes that others could only dream of, so he'd lost all desire towards all of this since a long time ago. He was very clearly aware that since King Guyuan had spoken such words, then King Guyuan should have something to ask of them. Otherwise, King Guyuan would definitely not give them a supreme fortune for no reason. Of course, even if this fortune could be obtained with ease, Chun Shi wasn't very interested in it because he merely wanted to leave the origin world as soon as possible. After all, since he left the primal chaos origin was pursued by Tao Lord Su Tuo, and this journey in the origin world, an entire 30+ years had passed yet he still hadn't returned. So, his eldest senior brother and the others would have probably gotten worried by now. On the other hand, in the eyes of Ming, who drifted through the boundless starry sky for an era, there was only a single supreme fortune. It was to find the ultimate path towards the Tao, step into the eternal cycle of samsara, and return to the last era. Besides that, she was indifferent to everything else. So, when King Guyuan mentioned a supreme fortune, it wasn't able to move her heart at all. Only Meng Meng revealed a wisp of fervor in her eyes. However, it quickly vanished. Couldn't be helped. As a comparatively ordinary being of the origin world, it was truly too fearful of King Guyuan, and it didn't dare act rashly in front of King Guyuan at all. A wisp of surprise couldn't help but flash through the depths of King Guyuan's eyes when he saw both Chun Shi and Ming reveal such calm reactions. He pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "Since the origin heaven was defeated all those years ago, the entire origin world was completely sealed off, and the laws and order of the heaven Tao here fell into a state of absolute silence as well. Thus, up until now, the entire origin world is like a barren place that has no system of cultivation, no sex, and hasn't given birth to all sorts of techniques. It's even to the extent that it can't be said to possess its own civilization of cultivation." He paused for a moment and then said with a bleak expression, "I cultivated bitterly for many years and tried to change such a situation, yet I've been unable to succeed until now." His voice was low, and it carried pain and frustration. Chun Shi and Ming were able to clearly sense that King Guyuan was speaking sincerely, and he wasn't lying at all. However, they hadn't expected that such an extraordinary figure like King Guyuan would actually attach such importance to the entire origin world. "But when I saw the origin creation technique you created, I finally realized that if I wanted to help the origin heaven recover, then it was utterly impossible to accomplish with my ability alone." When he spoke up to hear, he actually didn't seem sorrowful anymore, and an emotion of happiness from obtaining release seemed to have surged onto his face. At this point, Chun Shi finally faintly understood a little, and his heart couldn't help but thump while his thoughts ran wild. "Have you heard of the core of origin world?" King Guyuan suddenly asked this question and jolted Chun Shi awake from his thoughts. The core of origin world? Chun Shi and Ming shook their heads in unison. Swish! King Guyuan flicked his sleeve. A pure, translucent, blazing, and dazzling dark blue ball of light that seemed like a gem appeared in space, and it emanated an ancient, primitive, and pure aura. In an instant, the entire valley had been dyed dark blue, and it was dreamlike and gorgeous. "This seems to be a heaven Tao." Chun Shi was finally visibly moved. He sensed the supreme energy of the laws and order within the dark blue ball of light, and it was pure and thick to the extreme. "Yes, this is the core of origin world." A wisp of a glow of respect surged into King Guyuan's eyes. However, strictly speaking, it should be called origin heaven. It's the order of the Heaven Tao that covers the entire origin world, and it's the master that I've pursued throughout my life. In the end, Origin Heaven was the name of the origin world's Heaven Tao, while Godsbane Heaven was the name of the Heaven Tao that enveloped the three dimensions and the ancient God domain. However, never had Xianxia imagined that King Gu Yuan had actually taken the Heaven Tao of the origin world as his master. No wonder he attached such importance to the origin world, and he even didn't hesitate to kill King Mo Luo and King Jiuling for the sake of the origin world. Ming was shocked as well, and she was unable to calm down for a long time. Unfortunately, my master fell into deep slumber since it was defeated by Godsbane Heaven, and it hasn't recovered until now. A wisp of a complicated expression appeared on King Gu Yuan's face, and then he gazed at Xianxia while his expression instantly became solemn and dignified to the extreme. Young man, I'm willing to have the core of origin world to you now. Are you willing to accept it? Just these words alone simply seemed like a thunderclap that shook Xianxia's heart to the point he couldn't maintain his calm. The core of origin world is the origin heaven, and the origin heaven is the law and order of the Heaven Tao in the origin world. So, doesn't his words mean that he intends to give the laws and order of the Heaven Tao to me? Isn't this a little too shocking? If anyone outside the origin world dared to speak about taking control of the Heaven Tao, then that person would definitely be annihilated by the Heaven Tao. Even the sovereign sect could merely utilize the energy of the Heaven Tao and speak about upholding justice for the Heaven Tao, yet it didn't dare speak about taking control of it. Even terrifying existences like the Divine Tao Protector clans made it their responsibility to protect the majesty of the Heaven Tao, and they didn't dare to arouse any intention to disrespect it. This clearly showed how shocking King Gu Yuan's suggestion was to Xianxia. As for Ming, she was completely stunned and filled with disbelief. Take control of the Heaven Tao? This was simply inconceivable to her. It was like a taboo that she didn't even dare think about. Why? After a long time passed, Xianxia finally recovered a trace of calm, and he asked this question in a low voice. He was slightly dazed and couldn't figure out why King Gu Yuan had raised such an inconceivable suggestion. For the sake of origin world. At this moment, King Gu Yuan had repeated the same reason. It was just a few words and seemed very vague, but how could anyone realize how much of his feelings were carried within it? For the sake of origin world. Even if Xianxia didn't understand it, he could sense the emotions contained within King Gu Yuan's voice. This supreme expert of the origin world had practically poured his heart and soul into the origin world, and his thoughts, intentions, and emotions were all placed onto it. It was even to the extent that he'd acknowledged Origin Heaven as his master, so it was equivalent to making this into the objective that he sought throughout his lifetime. Perhaps he'd made such a decision because he'd finally realized that just his strength alone was unable to revive the Origin Heaven? But why does he insist on doing this? Xianxia was extraordinarily shocked, and he wasn't able to calm down or digest all of this even after quite some time passed. Young man, what do you think of this fortune? Asked King Gu Yuan. It's beyond imagination. Xianxia sighed lightly and said, Unfortunately, the ability I possess is probably insufficient to enjoy such fortune. Your mistake. Throughout the entire origin world and even the outside world, there isn't another candidate as suitable as you are. King Gu Yuan spoke seriously. Don't worry, I have no intention to harm you. Xianxia replied with a question. So, I have to agree even if I don't want to? You can think of it like that. King Gu Yuan sighed with emotion. However, I still hope you'll be able to accept all of this sincerely. I don't want to entrust the core of origin world to someone that doesn't understand it. Xianxia said with a slightly helpless tone. Truthfully speaking, I'm not interested in it, so I'll probably be unable to live up to senior's expectations. King Gu Yuan frowned, and then he chuckled. I never expected that the precious treasure which King Mo Luo and King Jiuling coveted for countless years would become something you don't want at all. Xianxia said with a composed expression. I just want to leave as soon as possible. That's all. Leave. King Gu Yuan's eyes were suddenly suffused with a slightly curious expression, and it caused Xianxia to feel extremely uncomfortable and unable to help but ask. Senior, what's the meaning of this? I'm just curious. The way to leave is just right in front of you, yet you're actually refusing it resolutely. It really makes me wonder if you really want to leave or not. King Gu Yuan spoke in a neither slow nor fast pace. What? Xianxia was stunned, and then he swiftly came to an understanding. Senior, you mean that taking control of the core of Origin World would allow me to locate the way out? King Gu Yuan said, Is there a need to ask? Xianxia thought for a moment, and he realized that he really had been a little simple-minded earlier. The core of Origin World represented the laws and order of the Heaven Tao of in the Origin World, so if he took control of it, then why would he worry about being unable to break through the barrier around the Origin World and leave it? Looks like I have no choice but to agree. Xianxia spoke with slight self-ridicule. Yes, this is the only way and the only path you can take. No one from the outside world has ever stepped foot into the here before you, and there has never been a single being from the Origin World that could leave it. The reason is the core of Origin World. When he saw that Xianxia had started to gradually accept his suggestion, King Gu Yuan's expression had eased up greatly. Because the order and laws of the Heaven Tao in the Origin World are in a silent state of slumber, and it's no different than being sealed, right? Xianxia couldn't help but add, Yes. King Gu Yuan nodded. But why do you think I'll be able to accomplish it once I obtain the core of Origin World? Xianxia pursued an answer. Because you've brought change to the Origin World. I believe that Origin Heaven will definitely be able to awaken from its sealed-off state while it's in your hands. King Gu Yuan answered him without the slightest hesitation. He was very clearly aware that if he didn't eliminate Xianxia's doubts, then this young man would probably be unable to accept it completely. All right, I agree. Xianxia remained silent for a long time before he agreed to it. He was very clearly aware that he was bound to be unable to refuse since this conversation had begun. Fortunately, it wasn't a bad thing, and it could even be considered as a rare fortuitous encounter, so Xianxia didn't feel frustrated about it. Thank you. At this moment, as the #1 expert of the Origin World that had attained an unfathomably terrifying state in his cultivation, King Gu Yuan had actually carried out an unprecedented gesture. He'd actually bowed to Xianxia with a solemn and serious expression. This scene fully eliminated the last trace of fear in the bottom of Xianxia's heart. He was clearly aware that King Gu Yuan had really acted in this way for the sake of the Origin World. From that day onward, Xianxia, Ming, and Meng Meng stayed at the Verdant Valley, and they started to cultivate without any distractions. According to King Gu Yuan, his cultivation was still too weak and was utterly insufficient to wield the strength of the core of Origin World, and he might only be able to accomplish it by recovering his strength as soon as possible. Xianxia understood this because the core of Origin World was the law and order of the Heaven Tao, so how could it be taken control of just like that? Besides that, for the sake of allowing Origin Heaven to recover from its sealed state as soon as possible, Xianxia had even handed over the complete cultivation technique of the Apotheosis realm in the Origin Creation technique, and King Gu Yuan disseminated it on his behalf. In less than 3 days of time, all the living beings within the Origin World had obtained the Apotheosis realm's cultivation technique, and they also found out that Xianxia's group hadn't been killed and had become friends with King Gu Yuan. This news aroused excitement and relief in the hearts of all living beings in the Origin World. They were filled with admiration and respect towards Xianxia, and his status in their hearts even surpassed King Gu Yuan. After all, even King Gu Yuan was unable to create a technique like the Origin Creation technique and provided to all of them to cultivate. This had undoubtedly changed their destiny. 3 months later, Xianxia's combat strength had recovered to the universe-enlightened ancestral god realm, and he was only a step away from recovering to the Region Lord realm. The reason he'd been able to recover so quickly was because of King Gu Yuan's assistance. Every single day when the veil of night descended, the 9 moons that hung above in the sky would become Xianxia's place of cultivation, and even King Gu Yuan hadn't disturbed his cultivation. It was even to the extent that for the sake of allowing Xianxia to cultivate in peace, King Gu Yuan would frequently stand on guard by Xianxia's side in order to prevent him from being disturbed by the other residents of the Origin World. After all, Xianxia was the most renowned figure in Origin World, and he enjoyed the respect and admiration of all living beings. So, no one could say for sure that these residents of the Origin World wouldn't act rashly and crazily. Besides that, An extremely special and shocking incident had occurred in the origin world during this period of time. An icewood demon that resided in Nine Soul region had suddenly attained enlightenment and created a technique called Ice Light All. It was capable of creating thousands of ice alls that were sharp like swords and covered the heavens and the earth, and they possessed shocking destructive capabilities. In the eyes of figures of Chen Shi, Ming, and King Gu Yuan, such a technique was naturally extremely crude and nothing worth mentioning. But this was the first time that something like this had occurred throughout the history of the origin world. After all, an icewood demon had actually been able to create an offensive technique. That was simply inconceivable. This incident instantly caused a wave of shock to arise through the origin world, and it caused a huge uproar. When they found out that the icewood demon had obtained its inspiration from the origin creation technique and attained enlightenment to create such a technique, the admiration that the living beings throughout origin world had towards Chen Shi had simply arrived at an unprecedented height. Moreover, King Gu Yuan had even personally rewarded the icewood demon with numerous rare and precious treasures. Such actions aroused the zeal in the hearts of all the living beings throughout origin world, and they started to work even harder at studying the origin creation technique. Along with the passage of time, a few techniques had gradually started to appear within the origin world. All of them had been created by the living beings who were stirred up by the icewood demon. For a time, the atmosphere within origin world had transformed, and the grand spectacle of numerous rudimentary techniques being born had started to appear. The countless living beings within the origin world that possessed extraordinary intelligence had taken the origin creation technique to be a supreme divine scripture, and they'd relied on the mental cultivation technique and profundities within it to create all sorts of techniques. Such a scene was like one where a myriad of flowers were blooming, and it would be long before more and more techniques would be created as the number of living beings that attained enlightenment increased. The increase in techniques would definitely slowly take form into a true cultivation system, and as their doctrines towards cultivation varied, all sorts would definitely be created as well. All of this was thanks to the origin creation technique which Chen Shi created. This cultivation technique that had been honored as a supreme divine scripture by the living beings of origin world had imperceptibly become a general framework that determined the cultivation system of the origin world, and the creation of all techniques were comprehended from its profundities. However, the path towards the Tao that every single living being comprehended was different, and the comprehensions they obtained varied. King Gu Yuan noticed all of these changes, and he sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. Moreover, he felt extremely relieved because the origin world that had been in a dead state for countless years had finally started to change. This firmed King Gu Yuan's resolution to entrust the core of origin world to Chen Shi, and he felt that it was absolutely his wisest decision. For the sake of displaying his gratitude, King Gu Yuan had even bestowed some of the treasures he stored to Chen Shi, Ming, and Meng Meng. Another half-year of time passed. On this day, Chen Shi awoke from his cultivation while a wisp of bright light silently flashed through the depths of his eyes. He'd fully recovered his strength. Presently, he possessed a combat strength comparable to a 7th-star region lord, and the only difference was that he was utilizing origin energy and not divine energy. I wonder if I can find a way to fully fuse the origin energy I possess with my divine energy, the energy of my soul, vital blood. If I'm able to accomplish that, then would I be able to attain another breakthrough in my cultivation and wield a completely new form of energy? Chen Shi was lost in thought as a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. Young brother, it looks like you've recovered your past strength. Meanwhile, an aged and experienced voice suddenly resounded before King Gu Yuan's tall figure appeared in the distance. Senior, do you need something? Asked Chen Shi. King Gu Yuan spoke casually. In my opinion, it's time to hand the core of origin world into your care. Chen Shi's heart shook, and then he took a deep breath before he said, Thank you, Senior, for fulfilling my wish. No, it's you who are helping the entire origin world. You don't have to thank me. King Gu Yuan flicked his sleeve as he spoke, and then the pure, translucent, dazzling, and blazing ball of dark blue light had appeared amidst a wave of strange droning. Young brother, let's begin. King Gu Yuan's gaze burned with anticipation as he spoke in a low voice.